Hi, welcome to Rock and Metal Invasion. My name is Steve. Coming up on the show today, I'm doing If You Like Guns N' Roses, ... Basically, I'm going to be showing you some albums by bands that were either influenced by Guns N' Roses, or maybe like Guns N' Roses, were influenced by, were influenced by bands that Guns N' Roses were also influenced by, and so because of that, they have a similar sound to GNR. So, obviously, this is a very iconic album cover. Got the poster on the back. It's been on the back here in Rock and Metal Invasion studios since I started. Another iconic band, AC/DC. And this is, of course, the very well-known debut album that initially wasn't a big seller. It took a little bit of time for people to catch on to it. Sweet Child of Mine was a big breakthrough for them, big hit, and then they really took off. And, you know, for me, when I listen to that album, it's pretty much a perfect album, song after song, I like, and it's grown. It's actually grown on me over time, so I like it. I've sort of ended up liking it more and more over time, and even now, right now, you know, it's, over 30 years old, and I still like playing that record, still enjoy that record. And it really was a landmark album. And of course, you know, the fact that they've reformed pretty much, not totally the classic lineup, but they've got, I suppose, three of the more important people with Axl, Slash, and Duff there. And they are doing, you know, big time touring, you know, performing to thousands and thousands of people. So, you know, not only my generation, but, you know, younger generations are also getting into Guns N' Roses as well. But, you know, I think it's really important to think about the fact that in the 80s, there were quite a lot of bands that came out with albums that sounded quite similar to Guns N' Roses. And, you know, if you didn't know about these bands and you like Guns N' Roses, you might want to check some of these out. So, I'm going to start off with, now these are in no particular order. This is a band called Rock City Angels. Now, what's interesting about these guys is, I think this is like a one-and-done album. And the album's called Young Man's Blues. What's interesting? There's a couple of things, actually. But first of all, they actually came out with a double LP. So this is actually two records. That only goes to side C. So there's actually not a side, well, there's a side D, but there's no music on it. So that's one thing that's kind of interesting. So 3 sides of music for a debut album. Also, Johnny Depp plays guitar on one of the songs. Next up, Kill for Thrills. This is Dynamite from Nightmare Land. Now, interesting thing, I guess, about these guys, there is some, they do have a similar sound to Guns N' Roses. Came out a bit of time after Appetite for Destruction, 1990, on MCA Records. But of course, the guitarist is, and lead vocals is Gilby Clarke, who of course goes on to become a member of Guns N' Roses. Next up, like I said, this is in random order. Royal Court of China, geared and primed. Now, what's interesting, I think, about these guys is this is their second album. Their first was not as heavy as this, not as hard rocking, but they really developed into a more sort of hard rock image. They sort of had that sort of Guns N' Roses type of image. You can see them there on the front, that they sort of didn't have previously. It's a bit of a patchy album for me, I'd have to say, but I do like Get and Prime, the opening track on the album. And this one came out on A&M in 1989. So I just wonder if perhaps change of image, slight change of sound after the success of Guns N' Roses. Now this band here I almost didn't include because they are perhaps a band that some might put in the hair metal category. But, you know, of course you could almost argue, of course, that Guns N' Roses would go in that category. But I guess, you know, Motley Crue's probably the ultimate sort of hair metal band, aren't they? So Guns N' Roses is a little bit more what I used to call at the time, and other people I think at the time would categorise as more that sort of street metal type sound, and it's that kind of influence from Rolling Stones and Hanoi Rocks and that sort of those sort of influences. Sort of with the Sex Pistols and a little bit of 80s metal as well, all mixed into one. These guys are a little bit different in the sense that, like I said, I think they sometimes will put in the hair metal category. They've also got some Led Zeppelin influences, and you wouldn't really say that Guns N' Roses Led Zeppelin influenced that much, really. But this band is Salty Dog, and yeah, I think if you liked Guns N' Roses, you would quite a good chance that you'll like this One and Done. Well, actually, they have released a follow-up album, but it came out like a few years ago. I think it's just sort of their unreleased second album. So this is pretty much their only album that at least came out, around the time of Appetite for Destruction. Actually came out in 1990 on Geffen. But yeah, a pretty cool album. Got some good songs. Slow Days is my favourite off that album. Next band, I'm going to call these guys maybe the English version, of the UK version, maybe even of Guns N' Roses, and that's the Choir Boys. Again, it's that sort of Rolling Stones influence with a little bit of 70s rock thrown in there. And it's not that metal. It's not really, it's definitely hard rock. It's not a metal album, but they've got some cool songs. I actually quite like I Don't Love You Anymore, which is kind of this sort of it's a ballad, but in this same sort of way that Guns N' Roses have a ballad. I used to love her, but I had to kill her, or something like that, don't they? So, I Don't Love You Anymore is kind of similar to that. Good song. Hey You was also a popular song. They released a few more albums after this. But yeah, worth checking out. Now, next band is probably one band that almost, if not does, compete with Guns N' Roses. And I know some people prefer this band to Guns N' Roses. I'm talking about Love Hate. So they did come out after Appetite for Destruction. This album and the follow-up, in fact the follow-up's probably better, Wasted in America. Both albums are just classic. And again, you talk about perfect albums pretty much, especially for me, Wasted in America. Every song is just killer. Great band. And I hear lots of people talking about them on the VC, and so I know people know that they're good, but they just didn't, at the time, get the attention I think that they deserved. They, of course, by the time Wasted in America came out, that kind of music was starting to fade in popularity. So it was kind of difficult for them to get enough exposure and attention, and the grunge bands were starting to come in. But, if released a few years earlier, they might have been huge. Again, this next one's probably a little bit like Salty Dog. I sort of wondered, should I include this one? But I think they are definitely a band that you might like if you like Guns N' Roses. It's just good, solid, hard rock. They don't. You can see this is the band is Little Caesar, and you can see by the image at the back, they've got that real street look, but it's not glam at all. It's just good, solid, hard rock sort of sound, and that's their image. And yeah, produced by Bob Rock. There's some good songs on here. For me, it's a bit patchy. In Your Arms and From the Start, I like. And it's an enjoyable listen. The follow-up, I didn't like quite so much Influence, but still got some good songs. All right. Now, next band is a band that pretty much released their debut album around the same time as Appetite for Destruction, and it's amazing just how similar that these guys sound. I don't think their debut is anywhere near as good, but there's definitely a very similar sound and I'm talking about you may be able to guess, but yeah, I'm talking about Faster Pussycat. So this is their debut album. I was actually listening to their second album just last night, Wake Me When It's Over. This one here, and that really sounds like Guns N' Roses to me. It's at times. It's like, yeah, it's even like some whistling. It's like there's one song on there that's very reminiscent of Patience. See if you can. Can't actually remember the name of it, but when I was listening to it last night, I was like, yeah, this totally reminds me of Guns N' Roses. And of course, Whipped is their third album. And yeah, I just picked this up, re-released on vinyl on Real Guy Music. And I'm not so familiar with this album. So yeah, looking forward to playing that a little bit more. So there's those three albums, which were pretty much released. 87 was the debut. The second one I think came out in 89, maybe 89, and then Whipped 1992. So they had three albums over that period of time. All solid albums, all very similar sound to Guns N' Roses. Certainly similar sounding to Appetite for Destruction. Not so much Use Your Illusion. Yeah, and so they had three albums. Another band also sort of had three albums during that same period of time, and they have a very close link to Guns N' Roses. Again, you might be able to guess who I'm going to say is LA Guns, and of course LA Guns, the Guns, of course, from LA Guns is also the Guns in Guns N' Roses. So Tracy Guns is the guitarist. He was initially or at one point he was in Guns N' Roses. So that's where the Guns come from Guns N' Roses. When he left, he then formed LA Guns. And they released this album. This came out a little bit after Appetite for Destruction, 1988. Yeah, very similar sound, though, to Appetite. And, yeah, again, just like Faster Pussycat, they kind of had those three albums, over that period of time where this sort of music was still popular. So 88, and then Cocked and Loaded was 1989. 1989 for Cocked and Loaded. And then 1991, I think, for, this one here, Hollywood Vampires. And all three are really solid albums, good albums. There's no, it's hard for me to actually sort of say what of those three are my favourite. Probably the first one, perhaps. But, really good albums. Next one. Now, I'm just going to mention this one because if you like Guns N' Roses, it's always good to know, well, did the people from Guns N' Roses play on any other albums? And you might want to check this one out because it does feature Axl, Slash, and Izzy of Guns N' Roses with Alice Cooper on the song Under My Wheels. So this is the soundtrack to the decline of Western Civilization Part 2, The Metal Years. So you can check that out on that soundtrack. And to my knowledge, it's not on anything else. So if you want to hear that song with three of the people from Guns N' Roses, you need that soundtrack. Also, another one worth checking out that features Axl is Steve Jones, guitarist from the Sex Pistols. Now, this is a really kick-ass hard-rocking album. Much heavier than his previous album that he did, his previous solo album. He really got into the more hard rock image. You can see him there at the back. Hard to sort of think, he was once in the Sex Pistols. He looks more of a sort of a 80s hair metal kind of guy at that point, at that time. But, it's got the song I Did You No Wrong, which features Axl Rose on vocals, and it's really good. But there's some other great songs on here as well. Freedom Fighter, We're No Saints. Really good. Ian Astbury from The Cult also contributes vocals, and it's really good. Billy Duffy as well playing guitar on some of the songs there too. Another one. This one could almost be in the, if you like, AC/DC category, but I think the vocalist Vicky Wright is his name. Also sounds a little bit like Axl at times. So I'm gonna go with Johnny Crash, and the album is called Neighborhood Threat. yeah, it does sound a little bit AC/DC at times, but I think Vicky also sounds a little bit like Axl. Yeah, this is a good album, and you can see the image there at the back of the guy. The guy's kind of got that sort of, the same sort of image that Guns N' Roses had. And yeah, it's a good album. I really like that album. Next one up, a band with actually pretty similar sort of image and a fairly similar sound is Ashfire Ballet. Now, I'm choosing these guys because Wes Arkham is a songwriter on one of the songs here. He is a songwriter on Wasted Time. So, Wasted Time is one of the songs on here. And he's also contributed to some songs on Guns N' Roses album. So, yeah, so there's a bit of a link there. And it's a good album. And does have a similar sound to Appetite for Destruction. And also they released another album after that, so that was their debut album. There's another album after that which a lot of people don't know about, Good Pigs. I think it came out in 93. So a really unusual on a major label, for those sort of bands from that sort of genre to still be on a major label releasing music, and it's worth checking out. Worth checking out. There's some good songs. There's even a song written by Guns N' Roses on their second album, which is a really good song. So yeah, check them out. Ashfire Ballet. All right, next one up, Cats and Boots, Kicked and Clawed. I think I'm not sure if these guys were influenced by the bands Guns N' Roses were influenced by, or whether they heard Guns N' Roses and thought, yeah, that's the sound I want to do. I think it might be that. I'm not too sure though. I do know that the vocalist ends up leaving and forms a band called Bad Bones, which didn't particularly sound like Guns N' Roses. That guy, the vocalist, was Joe Ellis. Joe Ellis. And yeah, so he joins a band called Bad Bones. And after this, but it's a good album. I particularly like. It's not great, but there's a few songs on here I always like listening to. Her Monkey's my favourite song. Nine Lives Saved Me. I think that might have been a single. Shotgun Sally's a good song. So the first 2 or 3 songs, pretty good. Worth checking out. Now this is a really good album. I really like this album. I don't hear it get talked about very much. It's probably not easy to find, to be honest with you. But I think it's getting close to being as good as Guns N' Roses, or as good as Love Hate, or as good as LA Guns. It probably actually is as good as LA Guns. Not quite sure it's up to Love Hate, Guns N' Roses kind of quality, but the band is Child's Play, and Rat Race is the name of the album, produced by Howard Benson. My Bottle's a really good song. Rat Race also very good. Day After Night. The first side in particular is really, really good. Checking out. So that's the vinyl I'm going to show. So, if you like Guns N' Roses, check out some of those albums. I think you might like them. Now, just to finish off with, I'm just going to show some CDs, because there's been some bands that have come out in the mid-90s onwards that definitely were influenced by Guns N' Roses. Now, this first one is a Swedish band. This is Backyard Babies. This is their best of album. A Swedish band, and Highlights. Check that song out. That is a great song. This is a band, another Swedish band, still going strong. This is Hardcore Superstar. Now, this album I think came out 2000. I think this might be their debut album actually. But Hey Now off this album is really good, and it was good to see bands like this starting to come out around this time. New metal was pretty popular around 2000, but there was also a resurgence in hard rock and some of that 80s kind of sound, 80s hard rock sound. And so when this came out, I was like, oh, this is good. This is really good. Reminded me a little bit of Guns N' Roses, and like I said, Hey Now is my favourite song off this album, but there's some other good songs as well. I think what probably got that interest in that sort of sound again was probably the release of this album. I do actually have it on vinyl, so it's actually a bit funny that I'm showing the CD of it. I do have a vinyl copy of it, but I guess I was just thinking these are the more sort of modern or more recently released albums that sound like Guns N' Roses. This is, Buck Cherry, and I think it's came out about 1999, and was quite successful, of course. Lit Up, you may know of, or not may know, produced by Steve Jones. So, and Terry Day. But, really, this is probably their best album, and like I said, I think it's reinvigorated or re-energized the interest, and the fact that I think some bands or labels realized actually, this sound could be popular again and could be worth releasing. So you started seeing bands with that sound coming out a little bit more from that point. One of those, again, these guys would have probably come out around, this is 2001, and I'm gonna kind of call these guys, not guys, these are girls, almost like a female version of Guns N' Roses. This is Betty Blowtorch. Now, you could also say they're sort of a bit like L7. They definitely are. But really, this is a pretty cool album. I particularly like Size Queen, which I think for some people might be their least favourite song because it actually features a rap by Vanilla Ice on it. But I really like it. Unfortunately, Bianca Butthole, who is like the main force in the band, she died in a car accident. That pretty much was the end of the band. But really cool. This came out in 2001, like I said, and worth checking out. It's not. I don't think it's that easy to get, but really good, and good solid hard rock, early 2000s. Another one that came out around about that time, 2001 again. This is an interesting one because this one features a vocalist from a band who came out in the 80s or early 90s, and didn't hear about this guy for quite some time. And then he came out with a band called Beautiful Creatures, Joe Lestat, I think is his name. And it's very similar to Buck Cherry. It's possibly better, this album. I really like this album. 1am, Wasted, Step Back. It's really good. Of course, it also features on guitar the 6am guitarist, DJ Ashby. So he's on guitar. And Joe Lestat, that's the one. DJ Ashby. He doesn't. I don't think he plays on there. They released another album after this, and I don't think DJ Ashby's on that one. But and it's probably not as good. But this one worth checking out. Another slightly more obscure one that you might not be aware of, but they did come out again around that sort of 2000. 2000 this came out. Came out on Wind Up Records, and it's called American Pearl. And you can see just from the cover, it looks very Guns N' Roses, doesn't it? And just with the tattoos, guitarist out there, in the back cover. Images are slightly more modern. They've got more of the shorter hair. But the sound is real sort of classic, sort of, hard rock. It's pretty solid. There's a few good songs on there. So worth checking out. And finally, probably the most recent one. This one came out in, I think, most recent one I'm going to show. 2004 on J Records. This is a band called Silvertide and Show and Tell. Really good album. I particularly like Ain't Coming Home. Devil's Daughter's pretty good too. It's a bit, it's after that I can't really tell you what other songs I like or don't like, but I really like the opener, Ain't Coming Home. And you can see the back there, they've got, a bit of a Guns N' Roses image there. They were going for, I guess, and the sound is definitely a Guns N' Roses sort of sound. Alright, so there's quite a bit there that maybe you were familiar with, but then also maybe there's some there that are new to you. And like I say, if you like that sort of a sound, check those bands out. I think you might like them. Alright, that's it for now. Catch you later.